The ship was silent except for the soft hum of the life support systems. Alina Vance checked her equipment one more time, her fingers moving with practiced ease over each piece of gear. The data pad showed her location as a small blue dot on the edge of hostile territory. Behind her, the vastness of space stretched endlessly, filled with stars that had watched civilizations rise and fall for billions of years. Alina was a scout for the Terran Exploration Corps. Her job was simple in theory but dangerous in practice. She went places other people could not go. She found information that others could not find. And most importantly, she came back alive when the odds said she should not. The mission briefing had been clear. The Krathven, a predator species that had terrorized the Outer Rim for centuries, had established a hidden base on the moon of Nexar 7. Intelligence suggested they had acquired something valuable, something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The Galactic Union needed to know what it was. Other species had sent scouts before Alina. The Vellani had sent 3 of their best infiltrators. None returned. The Mordath, masters of shadow walking, lost 2 agents in a single night cycle. The crystalline beings known as the Shara tried using their ability to phase through solid matter. Their scout lasted 6 hours before the Krathven found him and shattered his form into 1,000 pieces. Now it was humanity's turn. Alina checked her oxygen levels one final time. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, having only achieved faster-than-light travel a mere 200 years ago. Most alien species looked at humanity with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. Humans were soft. Humans were slow. Humans had no natural weapons, no special abilities, no obvious advantages. What most aliens failed to understand was that humanity's greatest weapon was not something you could see or measure with standard equipment. It was adaptability. It was cunning. It was the ability to look at an impossible situation and find a way through it anyway. The Krathven were apex predators evolved on a world of constant danger. They stood 3 meters tall, covered in thick scales that could deflect most energy weapons. Their eyes could see in multiple spectrums, from infrared to ultraviolet. Their ears could detect the heartbeat of prey from 50 meters away. Their sense of smell was so acute they could track a single molecule through a complex of tunnels. They were, by any standard measurement, the perfect hunters. And Alina was about to walk into their territory armed with nothing but her wits and a few pieces of carefully selected equipment. Her shuttle dropped her on the dark side of the moon, far from the Krathven base. The impact was soft, cushioned by the shuttle's landing systems. Alina wasted no time. She gathered her gear and began her approach on foot. The moon's surface was rocky and uneven, covered in a fine dust that recorded every footprint. This was the first problem Alina needed to solve. The Krathven patrolled their territory regularly. Any sign of intrusion would bring them running. Alina pulled out a small device from her pack. It looked like a metal disc about the size of her palm. She placed it on the ground and activated it. The device began to emit a low-frequency vibration that disturbed the dust around it, creating the appearance of natural wind patterns. As Alina walked, the device followed behind her, erasing her footprints and making the ground look untouched. The Krathven had thermal sensors placed throughout their territory. Alina knew this from the reports of the failed missions. The Vellani scouts had tried to mask their heat signatures using chemical compounds. The Krathven had detected the chemical residue instead. Alina's solution was different. She wore a suit lined with a special polymer that did not block her heat signature but redirected it. The heat from her body was channeled through tubes in the suit and released through vents positioned near her feet. To a thermal sensor, Alina would appear as a small, warm spot moving along the ground, indistinguishable from the heat vents that dotted the moon's surface naturally. The approach took 4 hours. Alina moved slowly, carefully, stopping whenever she detected movement in the distance. The Krathven guards patrolled in pairs, their massive forms silhouetted against the starlight. They moved with the confidence of creatures who had never known defeat, never experienced the fear of being hunted. Alina watched them from behind a rocky outcrop, her breathing slow and controlled. She had learned long ago that fear was not her enemy. Fear was a tool, a signal from her body that danger was near. The trick was to acknowledge the fear without letting it control her actions. The base came into view as she crested a low ridge. It was larger than the intelligence reports had suggested. The main structure was built into the side of a cliff, with multiple entrances and a network of tunnels extending deep into the moon's interior. Guard towers stood at regular intervals, each manned by a pair of craftsmen with scanning equipment. Alina studied the layout for an hour, noting patrol patterns and timing the guard rotations. The craftsmen were disciplined but predictable. They followed the same routes at the same intervals, never varying their pattern. This was their weakness. They were so confident in their superiority that they had become complacent. The main entrance was too well guarded. The side entrances were monitored by motion sensors and thermal cameras. Alina needed a different approach. She noticed a ventilation shaft on the far side of the complex. It was small, barely wide enough for a craftsman child to crawl through. But Alina was not a craftsman. She was a human, and humans had a long history of fitting into spaces they were not supposed to fit. Getting to the shaft required crossing an open area that was swept by searchlights every 30 seconds. Alina timed her approach perfectly, moving in the darkness between sweeps, pressing herself flat against the ground whenever the light passed overhead. The dust mask she wore filtered the fine particles that would have made her cough and gave away her position. The ventilation shaft was covered by a metal grate. Alina pulled out a small tool and began working on the fasteners. They were designed for craftsman claws, large and easily gripped. Her smaller human fingers had trouble at first, but she adapted, using her multi-tool to get leverage where her hands could not. The grate came free with a soft click. Alina paused, listening for any sign that the sound had been noticed. Nothing. She slid into the shaft, pulling the grate closed behind her and reattaching it loosely so she could make a quick exit if needed. The shaft was dark and cramped. Alina activated a small light attached to her wrist, keeping the beam narrow and directed. The shaft extended deep into the complex, branching off in multiple directions. She pulled out her data pad and compared her location to the structural plans that intelligence had managed to obtain from an old construction company database. The central data core was 3 levels down and 200 meters to the west. Alina began her journey into the heart of enemy territory. The shaft twisted and turned, forcing Alina to crawl on her belly through some sections. The metal was cold against her body, but her suit kept her core temperature stable. She moved slowly, testing each section before putting her full weight on it. The last thing she needed was to make noise that would alert the guards. Voices reached her ears after 20 minutes of crawling. Alina stopped, pressing herself against the shaft wall. Below her, through a ventilation grate, she could see a large room filled with craftsman soldiers. They were eating, their massive jaws tearing into slabs of raw meat. The smell reached Alina through the grate, a mix of blood and something else, something that made her stomach turn. She waited until the meal was finished and the soldiers dispersed before continuing. The shaft took her past several more rooms, including what appeared to be barracks and a weapons storage area. Alina filed away each detail in her mind, building a mental map of the complex. The data core was protected by a heavy door and 2 guards. Alina observed them from her position in the shaft, noting their equipment and positioning. Direct confrontation was not an option. Even if she could somehow defeat 2 craftsman warriors, the noise would bring dozens more within minutes. She needed a distraction. Alina pulled out a small cylindrical device from her pack. It was a remote signal emitter, capable of producing a variety of sounds and frequencies. She programmed it to emit a high-pitched tone just outside the range of human hearing, but perfectly tuned to Krathvin's sensitivity. She dropped the device through a grate on the opposite side of the corridor. It rolled under a piece of equipment and began emitting its signal. The effect was immediate. The two guards reacted as if they had been stung, their clawed hands covering their ears. They spoke rapidly in their native language, confusion evident in their body language. One of the guards moved toward the source of the noise while the other remained at his post. This was not enough. Elena needed both of them gone. She activated a second feature of the device. A small compartment opened, releasing a scent that mimicked the chemical signature of Krathvin blood. The remaining guard's nostrils flared. His predator instincts kicked in, overriding his training. He abandoned his post and rushed toward the smell, weapons drawn. Elena had maybe 2 minutes before they figured out the deception. She dropped from the ventilation shaft, landing silently on the floor below. Her training had included months of practice falling without making sound, and now that training paid off. The data core door required a biosignature to open. Elena had anticipated this. She pulled out a small patch of synthetic material from her pack. It had been created using cell samples stolen from a Krathvin prisoner years ago, preserved and grown in a lab specifically for missions like this. She pressed the patch against the scanner and held her breath. The door slid open. Elena slipped inside and began her work. The data core was massive, filled with storage devices that held countless files. She could not take everything, so she had to be selective. Her data pad connected to the system, and she began searching for anything related to the Krathvin's recent acquisition. The files were encrypted, but Terran cryptographers had been breaking Krathvin codes for years. Elena's equipment cut through the security like a knife through paper. File after file downloaded to her data pad, each one revealing more about what the Krathvin had found. Her blood ran cold as she read the first complete file. The Krathvin had discovered the location of the Precursor Archive, a repository of knowledge left behind by an ancient civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. The archive was rumored to contain technology beyond anything the current galactic civilizations could imagine. Weapons, power sources, knowledge that could make any species the dominant force in the galaxy. And the Krathvin were planning to claim it for themselves. Elena downloaded everything she could find, her hands moving with desperate speed. The guards would return any moment. She had to be gone before they did. The download completed just as she heard voices in the corridor. Elena grabbed her data pad and ran for the ventilation shaft. She jumped, caught the edge of the opening, and pulled herself up with strength born of pure adrenaline. The grate closed behind her just as the door to the data core opened and the guards returned. They noticed nothing amiss. Elena allowed herself a small smile of relief before beginning her long journey back to the surface. She had the information. Now she just had to get it home. The return trip was more dangerous than the approach. The Krathvin had changed their patrol patterns, suggesting that someone had noticed something unusual. Elena had to stop multiple times, waiting in uncomfortable positions while guards passed within meters of her hiding spots. 3 hours later, she emerged from the ventilation shaft into the cold night air of the moon's surface. Her shuttle was waiting where she had left it, hidden in a crater on the dark side. She crossed the final distance at a run, no longer caring about stealth. Speed was her only friend now. The shuttle's engines roared to life as Elena threw herself into the pilot's seat. She punched in the coordinates for the nearest Terran outpost and engaged the faster-than-light drive. The stars blurred around her as the shuttle accelerated beyond the speed of light. Behind her, alarms were finally beginning to sound at the Krathvin base. They would realize soon that someone had stolen their secrets. But by then, Elena would be light years away, carrying information that would change the course of galactic history. The human scout had done what no other species could. She had walked into the den of the galaxy's most feared predators and walked out again with their greatest secret. And she had done it not through strength or special powers, but through cunning, preparation, and the simple human refusal to accept that something was impossible. Alina Vance allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as her shuttle raced through the stars. Then she began composing her report. The Galactic Union needed to know what was coming, and they needed to know fast. The hunt for the precursor archive was about to begin. Alina's shuttle dropped out of faster-than-light travel 3 hours later, emerging into normal space near Terran Outpost 7. The station hung in the darkness like a metal flower, its docking bays lit with soft blue lights that guided ships home. Alina's hands were shaking slightly as she guided her shuttle into the nearest available bay. The adrenaline that had carried her through the mission was finally starting to fade, leaving her exhausted and hungry. She had barely stepped off the shuttle when Commander Marcus Webb intercepted her. Webb was a tall man with gray hair and hard eyes that had seen too many wars. He had been running operations in this sector for 20 years, and very little surprised him anymore. "You made it back," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "The Villani gave us 30% odds on that." Alina handed him the data pad. "I got what we needed, and more." Webb's expression changed as he scanned through the files. The neutral mask slipped, replaced by something Alina had never seen on his face before: fear. Genuine fear. "The precursor archive," he whispered. "They actually found it." "They know where it is," Alina confirmed. "And they're planning to send a fleet within the month, if they get there first." Webb did not need her to finish the sentence. Everyone in the galaxy knew the stories about the precursors. They had been the first intelligent species in the galaxy, rising to power billions of years before any current civilization existed. Their technology had been so advanced that even the fragments that survived were considered priceless treasures, a complete archive containing all their knowledge. "We need to brief the Council immediately," Webb said. "And I mean the full Council, not just the human representatives. Everyone needs to know about this." The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. Alina was debriefed by 3 different intelligence officers, each one asking the same questions from different angles. She described everything she had seen, every detail she could remember about the Krathvan base. The information was recorded, analyzed, and sent up the chain of command with increasing urgency. By the time Alina was finally allowed to rest, news of her discovery had reached every corner of the Galactic Union. Emergency sessions were being called, fleets were being mobilized, and somewhere in the background, Alina knew the Krathvan were doing the same. She slept for 12 hours straight, her body demanding the rest it had been denied during the mission. When she woke, there was a message waiting for her. She had been summoned to Earth, to the headquarters of the Galactic Union. The Council wanted to hear her report in person. The journey to Earth took 3 days. Alina spent most of it reviewing the data she had stolen, looking for anything that might give the Union an advantage. The files contained detailed star charts showing the location of the archive, buried deep in a region of space known as the Shroud. The Shroud was a dense nebula filled with radiation and gravitational anomalies. Navigation through it was considered nearly impossible. The Krathvan had found a way through. Their files included a complete map of safe passages through the Shroud, along with notes about the defenses that protected the archive itself. The precursors had not left their knowledge unguarded. Automated systems still functioned after millions of years, ready to destroy any ship that approached without the proper codes. The Krathvan did not have the codes, but they had analyzed the defense systems and believed they had found a weakness. A small ship, moving slowly and quietly, might be able to slip past the automated guns and reach the archive's entrance. Once inside, they planned to use brute force to crack the precursor security and claim whatever technology they found. Alina studied the plans with growing concern. The Krathvan approach was crude but potentially effective. If they were willing to sacrifice enough ships and soldiers, they might actually succeed. And if they did, No force in the galaxy would be able to stop them. Earth appeared in her viewport on the third day, a blue and green jewel hanging in the blackness of space. Alina had been born on a colony world and had only visited humanity's homeworld twice before. The sight still took her breath away. This small planet had given birth to a species that now spread across dozens of star systems, that had earned a place among the great powers of the galaxy. The shuttle landed at the Union headquarters in what had once been called New York. The building was a massive structure of glass and steel that housed representatives from over 100 different species. Alina had never seen so many aliens in one place. There were Velani with their silver skin and multifaceted eyes, Mordyth wrapped in their traditional shadow cloaks, Shara crystals floating in hover chairs designed to protect their fragile forms, and dozens of others, each representing a species with its own history and culture. They were all waiting for her. The council chamber was a vast circular room with seats arranged in tiers around a central platform. Alina stood on that platform, feeling very small and very human as hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. The council president, a Velani named Kethros, called the session to order. "Scout Alina Vance," Kethros said, her musical voice carrying easily through the chamber. "You have been summoned to present your findings regarding the Krathven and the Precursor Archive. The floor is yours." Alina activated her data pad and began projecting images onto the chamber's display screens. She walked the council through everything she had discovered, from the layout of the Krathven base to the star charts showing the archive's location. She explained the enemy's plans and their timeline. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then the questions began. A Mordyth representative raised his voice first. "How do we know this information is accurate? The Krathven might have allowed this scout to escape with false data, leading us into a trap." Alina had expected this. "The Krathven didn't know I was there. I left no trace of my presence. They only discovered the breach after I was already in faster-than-light travel, and by then they had no way to know what specific files I had accessed." "Even so," the Mordyth pressed, "your species has been part of the Union for only 2 centuries. How can we trust human intelligence on a matter of this importance?" Commander Webb, who had traveled to Earth with Alina, stood from his seat in the human delegation. "The Velani sent 3 scouts. The Mordyth sent 2. The Shara sent 1. All 6 are dead, and the Union gained nothing. Humanity sent 1 scout, and she returned with more intelligence than our combined species have gathered in 50 years of observing the Krathven." The Mordyth fell silent. A Shara crystal pulsed with light, its communication translated by the chamber's systems. "The archive is in the Shroud. No fleet has ever successfully navigated the Shroud. Even with the Krathven's maps, the journey would be extremely dangerous." "The Krathven believe they can do it," Alina replied. "And if they're willing to try, we have to assume they have a reasonable chance of success. We can't afford to sit back and hope they fail." Council President Kethros raised her hand for silence. "The question before this council is simple. Do we let the Krathven claim the archive unopposed, or do we mount our own expedition?" The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some representatives argued for a military response, sending a combined fleet to intercept the Krathven before they could reach the Shroud. Others preferred diplomacy, suggesting that the Union could negotiate with the Krathven for shared access to the archive. A few suggested doing nothing, pointing out that the precursor defenses might destroy the Krathven without any help from the Union. Alina listened to all of it, her frustration growing with each passing minute. These representatives were so focused on their own politics and fears that they were missing the obvious solution. She raised her hand and waited to be recognized. "Scout Vance," Kethros acknowledged, "you have something to add." "The Krathven plan to send a small ship through the defenses," Alina said. "They believe stealth is the key to reaching the archive. They're right. A full fleet would be torn apart by the automated guns, but a single scout ship, moving carefully, using the passages mapped in their files. She let the implication hang in the air. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Velani representative spoke first. "You're suggesting we beat them to it. Send our own scout to reach the archive before the Krathvin fleet can arrive." "Exactly," Alina said. "I've studied the Krathvin maps. I've analyzed their planned approach. I know I can do better. Give me a ship and I'll bring you the archive's contents before the Krathvin even enter the shroud." The chamber erupted in debate. Some called her proposal brave. Others called it suicidal. The Mordith representative suggested that if a scout was to be sent, it should be one of their own kind, better suited for stealth operations. Commander Webb stood again. "The Mordith are excellent at moving through shadows, but the shroud has no shadows. It's nothing but radiation and gravitational flux. What's needed there is adaptability, the ability to think on one's feet and solve problems that no one has anticipated. Human scouts train for exactly those conditions, and Scout Vance has already proven she can operate in hostile territory and come back alive." The debate continued, but Alina could sense the tide turning in her favor. The council was scared. They wanted someone to solve their problem for them, and she was offering to be that someone. Finally, Council President Kethros called for a vote. The measure passed by a narrow margin. A combined Union expedition would be assembled, consisting of a small escort fleet and a single scout ship. The scout ship would attempt to reach the archive while the fleet held off any Krathvin interference. And Alina Vance would pilot the scout ship. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Alina worked with Union engineers to modify her ship, a fast and maneuverable craft called the Shadow Dancer. They added extra shielding to protect against the shroud's radiation. They upgraded the navigation systems to handle the gravitational anomalies. They installed a new data storage system capable of holding whatever information the archive contained. Alina spent hours each day studying the Krathvin maps, memorizing every twist and turn of the safe passages through the shroud. She ran simulations until she could navigate the route blindfolded. She practiced evasion maneuvers until her reflexes were sharp enough to dodge automated weapon fire. Commander Webb visited her the night before launch. "You know you don't have to do this," he said. "You've already done more for the Union than most people do in a lifetime. No one would blame you for sitting this one out." Alina smiled. "Would you sit it out, Commander?" Webb was quiet for a moment. "No," he admitted, "I probably wouldn't." "Then you understand why I can't either." Alina looked out the viewport at the stars. Humanity is still new to the galaxy. Most species look at us and see soft, slow creatures with no natural advantages. They don't understand what makes us special. This is our chance to show them. "And if you don't come back?" Alina turned to face him. "Then the next human scout will try, and the one after that. We don't give up, Commander. It's not in our nature." Webb nodded slowly. "Good luck, Scout Vance. The whole Union is counting on you." "I know," Alina said. "No pressure." The launch came at dawn. Alina strapped herself into the Shadow Dancer's cockpit and ran through her final systems check. Everything was green. Everything was ready. The escort fleet assembled around her, a collection of ships from a dozen different species. Velani cruisers with their graceful lines. Mordith shadow vessels that seemed to absorb the light around them. Human destroyers bristling with weapons. Together, they represented the combined might of the Galactic Union. Alina activated her communication system. Shadow Dancer to Fleet Command, ready for departure. Commander Webb's voice came back over the speakers. "You're cleared for launch, Shadow Dancer. May the stars guide you home." The fleet jumped to faster than light speed together, their ships leaving trails of light against the darkness. The journey to the shroud would take 5 days. 5 days to prepare for whatever lay ahead. Alina spent the time reviewing her plans, testing her equipment, and trying not to think about everything that could go wrong. The Krathvin were already on their way. According to her calculations, Their fleet would reach the Shroud approximately 2 days after the Union force. That gave her a narrow window to reach the archive, download its contents, and escape before the enemy arrived. It was a tight timeline, but Alina had worked with tight timelines before. The Shroud appeared on her sensors on the 5th day. It was massive, a swirling cloud of gas and energy that stretched across several light years. The radiation readings were off the scale. The gravitational readings were even worse, showing dozens of zones where the laws of physics seemed to bend and twist in unexpected ways. It was, Alina thought, the most beautiful and terrible thing she had ever seen. The escort fleet took up defensive positions at the edge of the Shroud. They could go no further without risking destruction. From here on, Alina was on her own. "Shadow Dancer to Fleet Command," she transmitted. "Beginning approach to the Shroud. Maintain radio silence unless emergency. I'll contact you when I have the package." "Understood, Shadow Dancer," Webb replied. "Good hunting." Alina guided her ship toward the swirling mass of the Shroud. The radiation began to build immediately, making her sensors crackle with interference. She adjusted her shields and pressed on. The first safe passage was exactly where the Krathvan map said it would be. Alina entered it carefully, navigating by instrument rather than sight. The passage twisted through the nebula like a river through mountains, sometimes narrowing to barely wider than her ship, sometimes opening into vast chambers of relative calm. Hours passed. Alina lost track of time, her entire focus consumed by the task of keeping her ship on course. The gravitational anomalies tried to pull her off path at every turn. The radiation spikes threatened to fry her systems, but she adapted, adjusted, and kept moving forward. Somewhere behind her, she knew, the Krathvan fleet was approaching. They were faster than the Union had anticipated, pushing their engines to dangerous speeds in their eagerness to reach the archive. The window was shrinking with every passing minute. Alina pushed her own engines harder. The Shadow Dancer groaned under the strain but held together. She was so close now, so close to something that could change everything. The passage opened suddenly into clear space. Alina gasped as she saw what lay before her. The precursor archive hung in the void like a jewel, a massive structure of crystal and light that seemed to pulse with energy. It was larger than any station Alina had ever seen, large enough to hold entire cities within its walls. And it was beautiful, impossibly beautiful, designed by minds that had understood aesthetics on a level no modern species could match. But between Alina and the archive lay the defenses. Hundreds of automated platforms dotted the space around the structure, each one armed with weapons that made the Union's most advanced technology look primitive. Sensors swept the area constantly, searching for intruders. Alina took a deep breath and began her approach. The Krathvan had been right. Speed and power would not work here. Only stealth had any chance of success. She cut her engines to minimal power, drifting forward on momentum alone. Her shields were reduced to the bare minimum needed to protect against the ambient radiation. Her heat signature dropped to almost nothing, making her ship appear as just another piece of debris drifting through space. The first defense platform scanned her and moved on. Alina allowed herself a small breath of relief. She was right. The defenses were looking for active threats, not passive objects. She drifted closer, using tiny bursts from her maneuvering thrusters to correct her course. The archive grew larger in her viewport, filling her vision with its otherworldly beauty. She was so close now, so close. A sensor beam swept across her ship. Alina froze. The beam passed over her once, twice, 3 times. Then it moved on. She was through. The archive's docking bay opened at her approach, automated systems recognizing her ship as non-hostile. Alina guided the Shadow Dancer inside and set down on a landing pad that had not seen use in millions of years. She sat for a moment, hardly believing what she had accomplished. Then she grabbed her data pad and headed for the airlock. The precursor archive awaited. Alina stepped into the archive and felt the weight of millions of years pressed down upon her. The air was clean and fresh, maintained by systems that had outlasted civilizations. The lights glowed with a soft blue radiance that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And the silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of her own breathing. She moved forward slowly, her data pad scanning everything it could detect. The entrance hall was vast, lined with columns of crystal that pulsed with inner light. Symbols covered the walls, writing in a language that no living being could read. But the archive itself seemed to anticipate this problem. As Alina approached, holographic displays activated, translating the ancient text into galactic standard. "Welcome, seeker of knowledge," the translation read. "You have passed the Guardians. You have proven yourself worthy. The archive opens to you." A door appeared in the wall ahead, sliding open without a sound. Alina walked through it and found herself in a chamber that defied description. Shelves stretched upward into darkness, filled with storage devices of every conceivable shape and size. Each one contained knowledge, she knew. Each one held secrets that could advance galactic civilization by centuries. Alina activated her data pad's maximum capacity mode and began downloading everything she could reach. The archive systems cooperated fully, feeding information to her device faster than she had thought possible. Medical knowledge that could cure diseases no one had been able to treat. Engineering data that could revolutionize starship design. Philosophical texts that explored questions modern species had not even thought to ask. And weapons. Technologies of destruction so powerful that Alina felt a chill run down her spine as she read the summaries. The precursors had faced threats that made the Krathven look like children playing with toys. They had developed responses to those threats that could shatter planets and snuff out stars. Alina understood now why the archive had been hidden, why it had been guarded so carefully. This knowledge was a double-edged sword. In the right hands, it could bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy. In the wrong hands, it could bring annihilation. She continued downloading, prioritizing the beneficial technologies while flagging the weapons data for careful review by the Union Council. They would have to decide what to do with that information. It was above her pay grade. A warning flashed on her data pad. Motion detected outside the archive. Multiple contacts approaching fast. The Krathven had arrived. Alina cursed under her breath and checked her download progress. 80% complete. She needed more time. The archive's defense systems began to activate, automated weapons targeting the approaching fleet. Alina watched on her sensors as the first Krathven ships exploded, torn apart by weapons they could not understand. But there were more behind them, dozens more, pushing forward despite their losses. The Krathven were willing to pay any price to reach the archive, and they were paying it in blood. Alina pushed her data pad to download faster, 90%, 95%. The defenses were being overwhelmed. The Krathven had brought more ships than anyone had anticipated, and they were throwing them against the automated guns with suicidal fury. One by one, the defense platforms were destroyed or disabled. 100%, download complete. Alina grabbed her data pad and ran for the Shadow Dancer. She could see through the transparent walls of the docking bay as Krathven ships began to enter the archive's outer perimeter. They had breached the defenses. They were coming. She threw herself into the pilot's seat and powered up her engines. The Shadow Dancer lifted off just as the first Krathven transport landed in the docking bay behind her. She could see the massive predators spilling out of their ship, weapons drawn, searching for her. They were too late. The Shadow Dancer shot out of the docking bay and into space. Alina pushed her engines to maximum, ignoring the strain warnings that flashed across her console. She needed to reach the safe passage before the Krathven could cut her off. A Krathven fighter appeared on her sensors, accelerating to intercept. Elena threw her ship into a tight spin, dodging the first burst of weapons fire. She returned fire with her own guns, a pathetic response compared to the firepower aimed at her. But she was not trying to destroy the fighter. She was trying to distract it. Her maneuver worked. The fighter adjusted its course to pursue her, giving her a few precious seconds to reach the passage entrance. More fighters were launching from the Krathvan fleet. Elena counted a dozen of them, all vectoring toward her position. She was fast, but they were faster. She could not outrun them in a straight line. So she did not try. Elena dove into the safe passage, pushing her ship to speeds that were dangerous even for this relatively stable corridor. The Krathvan fighters followed, their pilots confident in their superior craft. They did not know the passage like Elena did. She had spent weeks memorizing every twist and turn. She knew exactly where the dangerous sections were, exactly how fast she could push through each segment. The first Krathvan fighter tried to match her speed through a narrow section and miscalculated. It clipped the passage wall and exploded in a ball of fire. The second fighter braked too hard to avoid the debris and was caught by a gravitational eddy that pulled it off course. Elena kept flying. 3 more fighters went down in the next section, victims of their own aggression and her intimate knowledge of the passage. The remaining pursuers began to slow down, realizing that they could not catch her without killing themselves. Elena burst out of the shroud and into open space. The Union fleet was waiting for her, their weapons already targeting the passage exit. As the first Krathvan fighter emerged behind her, it was met with a wall of fire from a dozen ships. "Shadow Dancer to Fleet Command," Elena transmitted, her voice barely steady. "Package acquired, requesting immediate extraction." Commander Webb's response was almost immediate. "Understood, Shadow Dancer. Jump coordinates transmitted. We'll cover your departure." Elena entered the coordinates and engaged her faster-than-light drive. The stars blurred around her as she jumped to safety. Behind her, the Union fleet began its withdrawal. They had accomplished their mission. They had what they came for. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. Elena spent most of it sleeping, her body and mind exhausted by the ordeal. When she was awake, she reviewed the data she had downloaded, marveling at the knowledge it contained. The precursors had been more advanced than anyone had imagined. Their technology could change everything. But she also thought about the weapons data, the technologies of destruction that made everything else pale in comparison. The Union Council would have to make hard decisions about that information. Some of it was too dangerous to ever be released. Some of it might be necessary to protect against future threats. Those were decisions for leaders, not for scouts. Elena's job was done. Earth appeared in her viewport on the 3rd day, the same beautiful jewel she had seen before. But it looked different now, more precious, more worth protecting. She had seen what advanced civilizations could do to themselves, had read the precursor records of wars that had lasted millennia and consumed countless lives. Humanity's homeworld could suffer the same fate if the wrong information fell into the wrong hands. The Council was waiting for her when she landed. Not just the human representatives, but leaders from every species in the Union. They had come to witness the delivery of the precursor data, to see for themselves what Elena had risked her life to obtain. Elena walked into the council chamber and placed her data pad on the central platform. "The knowledge of the precursors," she said simply. "All of it that I could download in the time available, including technologies that could advance our civilizations by centuries, and weapons that could destroy them entirely." The chamber was silent as the implications sank in. Council President Kethros rose from her seat. "The Galactic Union owes you a debt that can never be repaid, Scout Vance. You have given us knowledge that will shape the future of every species in the galaxy. What reward can we offer that would be worthy of this gift?" Elena thought for a moment. "I don't want a reward," she said finally. "I want a promise. Promise me that this knowledge will be used wisely. Promise me that it will be shared fairly among all species. Promise me that the weapons data will be protected, used only as a last resort against existential threats. The precursors trusted us with their legacy. We have to be worthy of that trust. Kethros nodded solemnly. The Union accepts these conditions. The precursor archive will be administered by a joint committee with representatives from every member species. All knowledge will be evaluated and released according to strict protocols. The weapons data will be sealed away, accessible only by unanimous vote of the full council. Then my job is done, Alina said. The ceremony that followed was brief but meaningful. Alina was awarded the highest honors that each species could offer, medals and titles that she knew she would never use. What mattered more was the respect she saw in the eyes of the alien representatives. They no longer looked at humanity as soft, slow creatures with no natural advantages. They saw what humans really were: adaptable, cunning, determined, a species that refused to accept impossible odds. Commander Webb found her afterward, as she was preparing to leave the council chamber. "What will you do now?" he asked. "You could have any assignment in the fleet, any position you wanted." Alina smiled. "I'm a scout, Commander. It's what I do. There's always more territory to explore, more secrets to uncover. The galaxy is a big place." "The Krathven won't forget what you did," Webb warned. "You humiliated them. They'll be looking for revenge." "Let them look," Alina said. "I'll be ready." She walked out of the council chamber and into the sunlight of a new day. The streets of the city were filled with people from 100 different worlds, all of them living together in peace because of the union that protected them. It was not perfect. It was not always fair, but it was better than the alternative. Alina had seen the alternative in the precursor records: wars that consumed everything, civilizations that destroyed themselves with their own weapons, billions of lives lost because beings who should have known better could not find a way to coexist. Humanity had a chance to do better, to be better. Alina had given them the tools. What they did with those tools was up to them. She hailed a transport and headed for the spaceport. There was a sector on the outer rim that had been reporting unusual readings, probably nothing important, probably just natural phenomena. But then again, that was what everyone had said about the shroud. Alina Vance, human scout, smiled as she boarded her ship. The stars were calling, and she had never been good at sitting still. The galaxy was full of secrets, and she was going to find them all. The news of Alina's success spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every sentient being in Union space knew about the human scout who had outsmarted the Krathven and claimed the precursor archive. Humanity's reputation underwent a dramatic transformation. Where once they had been dismissed as newcomers without special abilities, now they were regarded with a mixture of respect and cautious admiration. The Krathven retreated to their home territory, humiliated and weakened by their failed assault on the archive. Their fleet had been decimated, their hopes of galactic dominance shattered. The war that many had feared was avoided, at least for now. But Alina knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Krathven would rebuild. They would plan. They would try again. And when they did, the Union needed to be ready. The precursor data proved even more valuable than anyone had anticipated. Medical breakthroughs came within months, including treatments for diseases that had plagued multiple species for generations. Engineering advances followed, leading to faster ships, more efficient power systems, and stronger defensive technologies. The knowledge spread according to the protocols Alina had demanded, shared fairly among all member species regardless of their power or influence. The weapons data remained sealed, guarded by the most sophisticated security systems that Union engineers could devise. Only the Council could authorize its release, and only in the face of an existential threat to all life in the galaxy. Alina hoped that day would never come. 6 months after her return from the archive, Elena received a personal message from Council President Kethros. The Vellani leader wanted to meet with her privately, away from the cameras and the politics. They met at a small garden on the outskirts of the capital city, a place where plants from a dozen worlds grew side by side in carefully maintained harmony. Kethros was waiting when Elena arrived, her silver skin gleaming in the afternoon light. "Thank you for coming," Kethros said. "I wanted to speak with you away from official channels. What I have to say is not for the record." Elena nodded. "I'm listening." Kethros gestured to a bench nearby, and they sat together amid the alien flowers. "The archive contained information that we have not released to the public," she said. "Information about the precursors themselves, why they disappeared, what happened to them." Elena felt a chill run through her despite the warm air. "And they faced a threat from outside the galaxy," Kethros said quietly. "Something that attacked them across all their systems simultaneously. The records are incomplete, but it appears that the precursors were not destroyed by their own weapons or their own conflicts. They were eliminated by an external force that considered them a nuisance." Elena sat in silence for a long moment, processing this revelation. "And this force, is it still out there?" "We don't know," Kethros admitted. "The records suggest that the attack happened millions of years ago. Whatever killed the precursors may have moved on to other galaxies, or it may be waiting, watching. The archive contained warnings but no clear information about the nature of the threat or whether it might return." "Why are you telling me this?" Elena asked. Kethros turned to face her, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the garden's colors. "Because the Union needs scouts more than ever. Not just to explore new territory, but to watch for signs of this threat. To be our eyes and ears at the edge of the unknown. The precursors had such scouts, according to their records. They called them the Watchkeepers." "And you want me to be a Watchkeeper?" "I want you to lead them," Kethros said. "A new program drawing from all species in the Union. Humans have proven themselves more capable than any of us imagined. Your adaptability, your cunning, your refusal to accept defeat. These are exactly the qualities we need. Will you help us?" Elena looked out at the garden, at the plants from different worlds growing together in harmony. It was a small representation of what the Union could be, what the galaxy could be if the threats from within and without could be managed. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll help." The Watchkeeper program was established within the year. Elena handpicked the first class of recruits, drawing from every species in the Union. She trained them in stealth, in observation, in the art of going places they were not supposed to go and coming back alive. She taught them what it meant to be human, to be adaptable, to be cunning. And she taught them to watch, to pay attention to the edges of known space, to note anything unusual, anything that might suggest the return of the threat that had destroyed the precursors. Years passed. The Union grew stronger, united by the shared knowledge of the archive and the shared responsibility of protecting it. The Krathven remained quiet, rebuilding their strength but not daring to challenge the Union's enhanced technology. Other species joined the alliance, drawn by the promise of precursor knowledge and the protection that came with membership. Elena continued to lead the Watchkeepers, sending scouts to the farthest reaches of the galaxy and beyond. They found many things in those distant places, new species, new worlds, new mysteries to solve. But they found no sign of the threat that had destroyed the precursors. Maybe it had moved on. Maybe it was waiting. Maybe it did not exist at all, and the precursor records were nothing more than ancient myths. Elena hoped it was one of the first two options, because myths did not destroy advanced civilizations. Myths did not leave empty archives hidden in dangerous nebulae. Whatever had killed the precursors was real, and someday someone would have to face it. 10 years after her mission to the archive, Elena stood on the observation deck of the Watchkeeper command station, looking out at the stars. She was older now, with gray streaking her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. But her mind was still sharp, her instincts still honed to a razor's edge. Commander Webb had retired years ago, passing the torch to a new generation of officers. Many of the council members Alina had known had been replaced by younger representatives. The galaxy was changing, growing, evolving in ways that the precursors might have approved of. A young scout approached her, a human woman named Lily Chen. She had been one of Alina's first recruits, and now she led her own team of watchkeepers. "Ma'am," Lily said, "we've received an unusual reading from the Outer Rim. Sector 74 near the Galactic Barrier. Energy signatures that don't match anything in our databases." Alina felt her pulse quicken. After 10 years of waiting, of watching, of hoping that the threat was nothing more than ancient history. "Show me," she said. The readings appeared on the observation deck's display. Lily was right. The energy signatures were unlike anything the Union had ever encountered. They were powerful, organized, and definitely not natural. Something was out there, something was coming. Alina smiled, surprising herself with the expression. She had spent her whole life preparing for moments like this, preparing to face the unknown, to go where others could not go, to find a way through impossible situations. "Alert the council," she said, "and prepare my ship. It's time for one more mission." Lily looked at her with concern. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're not as young as you used to be. Let me take this one." Alina shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, Lily, but this is what I've been waiting for, what we've all been waiting for. I need to see it for myself." She walked toward the docking bay, her steps carrying the confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. Behind her, Lily scrambled to alert the council and prepare the support fleet. The Shadow Dancer was still there, maintained and upgraded over the years, but still fundamentally the same ship that had carried Alina through the shroud. She ran her hand over its hull, feeling the familiar metal beneath her fingers. "One more mission," she whispered. "Let's see what's out there." The ship's engines hummed to life, and Alina Vance set course for the unknown. Behind her, the watchkeepers mobilized. The council convened in emergency session. The entire Union held its breath. Humanity's greatest scout was heading into the darkness once more, and whatever she found there, the galaxy would be changed forever. But that is a story for another time.